All right, glad to have you back. Now, let's start our next conversation. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited has reduced pump prices of premium motor spirit, otherwise known as petrol, so that its outlets across the country as the competition in the downstream sector of the oil industry intensifies. Yes, that is key. That conversation has been on for some time. And the change in price comes a few days after Dangote Refinery announced the reduction of ex-depot price of petrol. And, of course, that's for its partners across the country. TVC News confirmed that some NNPC retail outlets have adjusted the pump price of petrol to its new price of 860 naira per litre, as against the previous price of 945 naira. And that's what we've seen. Meanwhile, the Petroleum Retailers Outlet Owners Association of Nigeria said the recent petrol price reduction by Dangote Refinery, as well as the recent cuts by NNPC filling stations, would help address inflation. The Group Chief Corporate Communications Officer of the NNPCL, Mr. Olufemi Shoneye, notes that these adjustments occur regularly and they influence market and the market forces, they affect the market actually influences this. That's what we've seen in recent times, this flip-flop around pricing. I have Mr. Jide Pratt, who is the COO, owner, and country manager, Trade Grid. Thank you so much. It's your first time on the show. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for talking to me today.
Yeah, I think we should start with this price war, this back and forth. I don't know, some call it price war, but I think it could be called that. Immediately after deregulation, we saw fuel selling for as much as 1,300 naira. And as of today, we can get fuel for 860 and on all of that. And Nigerians are saying we even want it to come down more. But what would you say about this back and forth reduction and all of that around the price of PMS?
Okay, thanks again, Tolu. So I think we should start from the beginning.
Good.
The aim of deregulation is to bring in all players and let them compete. That said, it will mean that the ultimate benefactor of a price war or a competition in the market is the end user, the people who buy from the petroleum pumps. That said, two things would also affect that. Every time crude oil prices go up, it will mean that by effluxion, the cost of petroleum products will go up.
Yes.
The second factor, because we buy and sell in our Nigerian naira, would mean if you're converting crude from the US dollar to naira, it will mean that if the exchange rate is higher, then it means that the prices will also be higher. And when it's lower, it means that the prices will be lower.
Yeah.
Again, the aim of this is that once you have an atmosphere for competition, then it means that some people are refining, some people are importing. But the aim of everything is for everybody to get to what you call on the refining side an ex-refinery price, and then a landed price for those who are importing. Bottom line, a customer is able to drive in and determine, this is where I want to go and buy from. Maybe the look and feel, maybe just the price. But that can only happen in an environment that is competitive. So,
a competitive environment.
That's correct.
So deregulation has thrown us into that competitive market. Is that what you're saying?
Without a shadow of a doubt, because think about it, and let's back up a bit. There were times when the only supplier was the national oil company.
Yeah.
So whether we liked it or not, we were bound to buy from the national oil company because it sold to everybody else. We also came from somewhere where we hadn't been able to refine petroleum products for over a decade. So you see, two things happened with deregulation. It had fostered the atmosphere for people to come and compete. It had removed the ceilings. And then I think the magic bullet, quote and unquote, was the fact that a refinery, a super refinery came on board. So, I mean, I think we're on the right track so far.
Well, my next question would be deregulation and post-PIA passage and all of that, where are we? But that competition that everyone expects, some believe that the role of the national oil company still remains very important in all of this.
When you say the role, let's put it in perspective.
Okay.
The national oil company could be a player or a regulator.
It can't be both.
It cannot, it should not be both.
Should not be both.
So now if the national oil company is a player, then what it means is that she plays her part in that competition, while the regulator determines what is fair and right in the industry. So let's just back up a bit. The national oil company has assets that she's going to, and I'll use the word sweat, So while she has crude oil, she has JV agreements, joint venture agreements in terms of crude.
Yeah.
But she also plays on the retail space with what you call NNPC retail.
Yeah.
Now, that said, it means that she owns refineries. So let's say in the value chain, she's totally integrated. If she's integrated, then she should be very, very important in playing a part to, let me say, balanced competition. That said, there's also people who for 20 years, 30 years have owned what you call depot and tank farms. Their only job has been, they've invested and they've invested for 20 years or more. So what it does mean is that they must also be able to look from their trading platforms and trigger to say, what do I want to get at a landing cost into Nigeria? I already have retail outlets, so I can push some of my products through my retail outlets. I have trucks, I have BRV, so I can move them from point A to point B. So they play across that supply and distribution space. But Tolu, don't forget, when we started this conversation, we started this by saying that we had removed subsidy.
Yeah.
So May 29, 2023 was subsidy is gone. So it allowed different people come into the space as long as they had the capacity and capability to come and compete for prizes.
There's a fear of monopoly in that market.
There's always going to be a fear of monopoly when someone is the market leader. So let's go back again. We've talked about refineries. There's only one refinery in Nigeria that has a 650,000 barrel nameplate capacity. There's nobody that touches that. So it does mean that while we say that regulation must be tight, competition must also be more. Because what you're trying to do is ensure that nobody takes an undue advantage of the market and forestalls or prevents competition. If that happens, then we will be moving from a national oil company monopoly to a refinery monopoly. So the regulators need to be up and doing things like price revelation templates to say that, how did you get your landed cost? How did you get your ex-refinery cost? How much are you taking out? Does it give an undue advantage to the market leader or otherwise? So I think those are the things that come up when you look at it, the regulated society.
It's an interesting conversation. And for me, before we move to gas, which I want us to really talk about, I want to get your views around that. The issue of consumption. Just a few days ago, Mr. Bismarck Rewani still said it at a function, 17 million liters per day and all of that. There's been this back and forth around that. At first, when subsidy was removed, we heard that there was a decline with regards to those figures. But now again, we are getting back. What do you make of that? How can we, a bit of accuracy when it comes to that? I know we have regulators, we have the authority and all of that, but what do you think as an expert needs to be done in that space?
I think that data is missing, and I've said this on a lot of fora. Data is missing. So look at it this way, Tolu. If a vessel brings in, and I'm just going to use a few numbers, 20,000 metric tons. Once it drops that into a tank, you distribute it to retail stations.
Yeah.
Now, whatever is going to be sold or whatever is sold is what goes through the nozzle.
Yep.
So if you assume that I've moved 45,000 liters from a depot to a retail station and put it in the underground tank, if I only sell 10,000 liters a day, it means that my consumption as a station is 10,000 liters a day, not 45,000 liters a day, which is the delivery. So I think to a large extent, data is missing because we're getting analysis based on numbers that, in my opinion, are bogus. I also think that people are not buying as much as they used to because people are now managing some of their, let me say, their movements. But the days of fill it up, you hear let's fill it up now. In my opinion, we should be banking around 30 or 35 million liters.
I think so too.
This is my
35.
opinion.
That's what we should be doing. If really we're going to look at the pricing and the level of what we've been. Well, let's shift. The focus is now on CNG, and everyone is talking about cleaner energy. You know, let's move away. Energy transition is on the line and all of that. But let's focus on our country and efforts being made by government. We've seen a lot of executive orders around that space trying to make sure that is more attractive, I think, for investors. Right. But what do you make of the efforts of President Bola Tinubu, of course, spearheaded by the SA, Oluverejane and all of that? What do you make of that, and how well do you think we are moving in track, we are aligning with use of clean energy?
I think to a large extent, and if we talk about Oluverejane, I think she's someone, in my opinion, who is focused.
Yeah, everyone is saying that.
So whether the president did right or wrong, what he's done is that he's picked someone who's focused enough to drive the issue. She comes from a gas background.
Oh.
Yes, she comes from a gas background. So think about a few things. The Executive Order 40 which spoke to non-associated gas oil. And the emphasis here is on non-associated, because ideally if you drill a well and you're lucky, or quote unquote, gas comes out, so it's associated. So you have the option of selling your oil and using some of your proceeds to develop your gas. Now, if you go to some gas pockets or gas finds where there is no oil, it is non-associated. So what the president did with Executive Order 40 was to say, I'll give you some fiscal incentives to go into somewhere where you don't find oil to actually bring out gas. So that has worked well. Look at the CNG initiative. The CNG initiative was to try and take some pressure off petrol-driven cars.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's a work in progress. It's cheaper fuel, it's cleaner fuel, but we must also understand that with CNG, compressed natural gas, there are two things that make it happen. You need a mother station, and then you need a daughter station. So assume the mother station is where you do the extraction. Then assume the daughter station is where you fuel into cars. So while cars convert, and that's what the PCNGI has been doing, Presidential CNG Initiative, they're converting cars to move from petrol, and it's a dual fuel, so you could use your petrol. If it finishes, you could switch. That's one thing about CNG. But it also means that more work needs to be done gas, because the farther you go away from a mother station, the more expensive CNG is going to be. So things like the AKK pipeline, that needs to be finished. We've had some successes in something called OB3. OB3 is a combination of gas processing plants. We have what you call the ANO. These are quick wins. You heard about NLNG trying to get to Train 7.
Yeah, Train 7, yeah.
But you look at it, even as NLNG is trying to get to Train 7, they're struggling with the fact that they don't have enough gas. So it's a bit of a conundrum for me that a country that has more gas than oil is struggling. So while the president may have made some good steps, it goes beyond the president. It goes to what happens in the next 4 years, because you can't start the gas journey and then jump off. We're 10 to 15 years late in terms of gas. So these quick wins that we have, like again, ANO, OB3, I think UTM Offshore is doing something in terms of FLNG, yeah. So yes, we have a lot of, but we also need to complete. Tolu, is not just to start it. Start it, complete it. The more we can get gas going around in terms of industrialization, transportation, logistics, it's better for it. So we can also now transit in a just energy transition manner. Gas is our comparative advantage. So we must use it to grow. Not discounting oil. Find cleaner ways of drilling oil. But it's the combination of the two that will get us out of darkness. Well,
because many would say it's capital intensive. Do we have the right infrastructure to drive that investment at the moment? That is one thing I always hear too. I don't know if what you think also around that. Are we having the right policies, would I say, in place that would attract the needed investment? We can't drive this alone as government.
Now, look at what we say, and you make a very interesting point. So the question is this: if something is not commercially or commercially viable, it's not going to get bankability. Nobody comes into gas and builds infrastructure for the fact that they have altruistic reasons. No, they do it because they want to be able to see their return on capital. So what that means is that the policies that the president has made, and that will still make, in my opinion, need to be tight. You don't want a policy that someone brings in $2 million, $3 billion, $4 billion, and then halfway into that project or that exercise, there's a political shift, or there's a legal shift. What it means is that the sources of that fund are gone. So we must have policies that are age-long. We must have policies, and one of the things the Executive Order 40 did is that it reduced the entry limits to what you must do to come and, like you want to apply for a permit. Let's assume in the past it was every 6 months. Now it's every 5 years. The volume, if it was 500,000, is now moved to about 5 million or 10 million. So what you're trying to do is put in a structure in place so that people come in and don't need to go back for documentation every year. The aim was also to see how we can make sure that getting to contract signing is done in 6 months. We had issues 3 years, 4 years. Someone is trying to, how is it going to work? When is it going to work? Policy consistency is something that we need to have. Legal framework and sanctity of contracts. And then most importantly, people will come where they see that their returns are secure. So investment will always change returns. So regardless of the color of our problems or the color of where we are, Once I see a viable project and it's bankable and I have the assurance that the government contract is tight, investment will still come.
Staying on that, let's look at crude production again. Let's take it back to crude because, like they would always say, we still need crude to do whatever we want to do. That's where the cash is coming from. And you know our budget is also predicated on 2.06 million barrels per day is what we are looking at. But my question really to you would be, the issue of vandalism and oil theft is something that we've also talked about for some time. I know that before now in the Niger Delta region, we used to have this local refiners, you know, burning and all of that. And you see diesel coming up from there. And, you know, they're local refining and all of that. But my question really would be, what's your assessment of efforts of government aimed at addressing or reducing oil theft? And this target, considering what we see moving forward, do you say, is it feasible?
I'm worried about the target. And why do I say so? If you look at what happened in January and February, at the end of January, we had a combination of crude oil and condensate of about 1.7.
1.7, yeah.
It dropped in February. So what that means is that, and this is where I'm going at, if a target of 2.06 needs to be met, then it means that we can't afford to undulate. We must find a way of hitting 1.7 and then incrementally, even if it's 60,000 barrels the next month, so that way we see that there's a trajectory. You must also look at it that we're hearing of less cases of vandalism.
Yeah.
Now, it could be one of two things. The military is doing well, or security agencies are doing well, or it's underreported. I don't know which it is. Or it could be a combination of two. But what it is that we must be able to continue to use community efforts. If a community sees that it's our oil, and they benefit from it's our oil, then ideally they should be the first line of action to secure our product. Conversations within the military, the security agencies need to be a bit more cordial. You don't go into one place, level a set of people and expect they will give you information. No, it's not going to happen. So these efforts have to be consistent. The drive also, if you look at what is happening with some of the, let me call it buyovers, Renaissance Group, Shell, you find out that local content is coming in. And that's onshore. We're not talking about offshore drilling now. We're talking about onshore. So you'll find out, like in local palace, local sense might help in terms of nipping some of the agitations in the bud. But the bottom line is that if those are done in a conducive manner, the first direct effect is that investment goes into those wellheads and those places. And you see that there's a ramp up. Before you know it, 100,000 here, 60,000 here, 70,000, it adds to that pot.
True.
And if we do this, again, I say it must be consistent. We can't do it on Monday and Wednesday it's not working right. So policies have to be sacrosanct. The route to growing these things, we have to be intentional. And then I think we have to play less politics when it comes to a lot of these things. We need to face it, decide that, look, this is what happened in Q1. What were the things that didn't allow it to happen? Why didn't we hit 100%? What do we need to do better in Q2? And we begin to grow this. Those are my opinions.
Before we wrap this up, because I know we could go on and on to every show. It's an interesting sector.
Yes,
the role of the marketers again comes to my mind, like the major oil marketers, the Ipman guys, and all of that. It's been back and forth with them with regards to this. Some say they're even losing some money with regards to this drop in price and all of that. Ex-depot prices are this today. They've paid. They've not gotten supply. The next day it's falling. The next day they've gotten some to their filling stations. They are yet to sell. Price has changed again. Where do you think where do they stand in all of this?
I think to a large extent that it's a 50-50.
Yeah, it is.
And why do I say so? If there's a gain in the market and you have stock, you sell for that gain. Sadly, the reverse is also the case. If there's a loss in the market and you have stock, you lose. So a lot of people say, why not just blend? So the weighted average cost of capital, I had a gain here, I have a loss here. But in trading, we say something fundamentally. You trade out of a problem. So you can't stop. They must just find cleaner ways and then diversify their product base. But I also think that we need to look at how markets drop prices, because the aim is not to kill competition. Again, I must say this. If you kill competition, then what it does mean is that we have gone back from an NOC monopoly to a refinery monopoly. And that should not be allowed. As long as customers are happy today, there are no whiplashes. But we must build a business that is sustainable, and as we continue to grow, the market is able to determine prices in a fair and competitive manner.
What's your outlook generally for the entire market?
But I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. We're getting some things right. We seem to place politics with some others. So if we're focused and the right mind, we talked about the essay to the president on energy. Yeah. In my opinion, that's a focused mind. So it's surrounding ourselves with people who are a bit more focused in terms of goals and achievements as against playing politics. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I would say that the glass is half full. Interesting chat with Mr. Jide Pratt, I must say, CEO, owner and country manager, Trade Grid. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. All right.